Welcome. This is the talk I gave at the IMCW Fall Retreat. If you can imagine, about day 5. So you've had 5 days of gathering attention, bringing yourself back again and again, observing what's passing through. Right after I got my master's, my teaching degree, I got a job through a very interesting series of events, teaching in a high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this high school was right at the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. It was a really magical time in my life. I got there, I sold my beat up car, I bought a motorcycle with a sidecar, and I just had a blast. And just as I got this job in such a serendipity way, I also, in a very serendipity way, stumbled into this fellow who had trained a lot of rock climbers. He worked for the Forest Service. And I think he kind of assessed my skills as being better than they actually were. I do not have a typical climber's body. It's more of an arachnid style body. I'm 6'5", big wingspan. And because of my crazy wingspan, I could do some interesting moves on the rocks. A more compact person would do like 3 or 4 moves, and I could do that in one, just by the nature of my my long, lean body. In any case, he put me into some, for me, pretty crazy situations. One of them was doing what's called a traverse, where you're climbing up the rock wall, and then you follow a lateral crack that's kind of somewhat parallel to the ground, and you use these chocks or these blocks, and so you insert the chalk into the crack, and then you yank on it and make sure it's going to hold. Then you thread a nylon strap through it, and then you step into that. You step into that nylon strap. So you put one here, and then one here, and then one here, and you kind of like work your way across. It was very intense and very nerve-wracking. And if you've ever seen the old sewing machines, the ones before they got power, you had to pedal them. So there's something called sewing machine legs, when you're kind of standing in these nylon straps where your feet just start spasming. So my feet are spasming. I'm looking down between my legs about, I don't know, it looked like 2 miles, but it was maybe 150 feet of air down to broken up rock. It was there that I invented a new climbing move. And I actually quite humbly feel this is a real contribution to the climbing community. I call it the mouth suck, where you are so desperately trying to put your lips to the rock that you stick your lips on the rock and you start sucking so you don't fall. The second invention I came up with is the nostril hang. This is where you hook one nostril over a crag and hope that it'll support your body when you lose your grip. Basically what I'm saying is that when you feel fear, you'll do anything to not let go. Well, my teacher also had a really interesting technique. From time to time, down below where, by the way, he was on the ground and where he was safe, he would at random times just yell, "Let go." And what we were supposed to do is let go, just go into fall. And he said that if you learn how to trust your equipment, you'll be able to recover faster rather than getting paralyzed with fear. And that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit. One of my favorite topics, how to let go, which is a deeply integral part of this practice. So what I'd like to talk about is how the degree to which you're holding on determines the degree of your suffering, how your intention to let go, just the intention, can begin to open up new possibilities and new doorways. And how, and this is really critical, I feel, is when you inquire into letting go, sometimes it feels a lot worse before it feels better. And then some thoughts on really letting go. What does letting go have to do with awakening and enlightenment? As I was thinking about this talk, I kind of looked out into the woods where here in Northern Virginia, the leaves are falling. And then I was getting ready for this talk. I was arranging what's left of my hair. And I thought, oh, this is kind of how it works, letting go. Happens all by itself sometimes. I could give a whole Dharma talk on hair loss. But there is this sense of how, as things change, we have to keep letting go. Monks shave their head as a sign of humility and renouncing the world. For me, it's more organic. It's happening all by itself. So the meditation master, Ajahn Chah, talked about our relationship to letting go. I always love this phrase, which I try to remember, which is not all the time, but part of this practice is, you can think of it as wholehearted, enthusiastic cooperation with reality. Kind of tough when you look in the mirror and like, whoa, what's happening? When I don't practice wholehearted, enthusiastic cooperation with reality, I'm not a happy camper. I get treated to the experience of what's called in this tradition of dukkha. And dukkha is stress. It's the unsteadiness of mind, the kind of unshakable dissatisfaction in life. Ajahn Chah, the great meditation master, when people would talk to him about their suffering, he would just say, you have rope burn. You're holding on to the rope too tight and you have to let go. And I would imagine you have sensed this holding on. The memories that just keep coming back and you just can't quite shake. Kind of the unprocessed stuff that's there. It's all this quality of holding on. And so holding on has got lots of flavors. My favorite word, I think, is clench, because you can feel the holding on inside. You can feel it in your nervous system. But just as the Inuits and the Yupik tribes and those who live in the northern edges of the planet, or the extreme southern edges of the planet, have all these names for snow, we have some names for holding on. So I think of it as the clench, but there's the clamp, the grasp, the clutch, the clinch, the grapple, the grip, the hold, the fasten, the clinging, the snatch, the hook, the contraction, the tightening, the constricting, the cramp, the squeeze, the nab, the snag. You get the idea. We are perpetually in this process of seeing what we're holding on to and sensing if we can let it go, or sensing if we can let it be. So we have this essential practice in meditation. And you can say that there are two qualities to it. One of them is noticing what's happening as it's happening. It's concentration. As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing out. I'm sorry. As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I'm aware of breathing out. That's great. As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing out. Actually, I've spent a fair bit of time there as well. It's called deep confusion. Sometimes in my meditation, I notice as I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I'm wondering how many years Happy Days ran before it went into syndication. So this is one part of the training. It's attention, it's gathering, it's concentration. But then there's this other element to practice, which is not only noticing what's happening as it's happening, but it's noticing your relationship to what's happening. Noticing the attitude in your mind. The mind moving towards something, the mind pushing something away, the mind kind of getting caught in confusion or muddiness. This is the arising of mindfulness, or, as was mentioned on this retreat, the witness. The sense of the witness is your capacity to access non-preferential awareness. non-judging awareness. Think of it like an unblinking eye. It's taking in everything, 360 degrees, inner and outer, without judgment. This is what begins to arise in our practice. And it arises when you begin to feel that clench and the whole response to that clench. I always think of this as riding a wave. We would often talk about this model back in my ashram days, how you're going along and things are great. Things are just fine. Lots of equanimity. And then there's this clench. Then there's resistance. And then you begin to feel the resistance level begin to build. It begins to form a wave, and it begins to increase. And as it increases, there's more resistance. There's more concern. There's this sense of there's something wrong. Either something wrong with me or something wrong out there. And if we don't have access to the witness, we get off the wave. And there are 5 mind states that we will employ to get off the wave. You'll spin off into anger, judgment, blame, ill will. You'll get off the wave by disassociating, by going into fantasizing, a sense of wanting. You get off the wave by getting caught up in hypervigilance, worry, that restless, agitated mind. You get off the wave by turning off feeling, by moving into sloth and torpor, that downward cycle into depression, like pulling the plug on your energy. You get off the wave by getting paralyzed by doubt, being paralyzed by that ruthless inner critic. These 5 mind states, these classical mind states of anger, judgment, blame, ill will, craving, wanting, desire, fantasy, planning, restlessness, hypervigilance, worry, sloth and torpor, doubt. These are what pulls us away from the here and now. But sometimes when you have the witness, when you can stay present to the clench, to that holding on, to that clinging, the wave will come up and it will crest, and then oftentimes there'll be some kind of a healing crisis. It's like a cry. You feel a strong emotion. It builds, you cry, it releases, and then there's something on the other side. You don't always cry, of course, but there's some kind of a catharsis point. It can feel like a weather system has moved through you, like that grief wave. It comes, it builds, it breaks, and then it gently releases. Sometimes there's an insight, which is part of this whole name of insight meditation. You realize what you're holding on to, but quite often you don't. It's just that something shifted, something moved on. So in this practice, we're learning how to stay with that discomfort. When the wave rises, can you call on that capacity to be the observer, be the witness? Notice how it arises. Learning how to stay, but also learning how to let it be and learning how to let go. This is one of the challenges in practice. It takes us right back to the fundamental underpinnings of this philosophy. Stress and suffering happen. If you look closely, you will discover the source. You will discover clinging, attachment, holding on. The third teaching, you can let go. The fourth, there's a path that takes you down this path of increasing your capacity to let go and let be, and to open to greater happiness, greater ease, and even to full awakening. Another model which I have mentioned quite a bit, which I find really, really helpful, really important for me, is recognizing that when you're holding on, there are 3 qualities of that holding on. And one of them tends to predominate, but they could even be all 3. The first one is you're holding on to life itself. You're holding on to your sense of identity. So hanging on to that rock face, looking down between my legs 150 feet or 2 miles, I was holding on to life. I was also holding on to my identity of being a decent climber. The second is kind of the fear of and holding on to control. It's the fear of losing control. So again, as I'm contemplating all the ways I can keep my body attached to that cliff wall, I was afraid of losing control. The third is losing attention, affection, and love. I was holding on to looking good. I didn't want to be judged by my peers and certainly by my instructor. So when you look at what you're holding on to, it can be a helpful thing. Like, am I holding on to a sense of identity, to a fear of death? And that can be death of body or death of identity. Is there a fear of losing control or a fear of losing attention, affection, and love? And we'll explore this a little more a little bit later. And so we know we have to let go, but why is it so hard? And I'm struck by this story. It's kind of a horrific little story, but it struck me. This story is from a courtroom. A deeply, deeply disturbed mother of a small child. It's horribly physically and emotionally abusive to this very, very small child. And it's determined that for this child's protection, it needs to be taken away for its own safety and well-being. And as the child is being taken from the mother, this child is crying out for its mother, even though it had been seriously harmed. We are attached to the familiar, and we are terrified of the unknown. One of my favorite readings speaks directly to one of the core fears that we carry. And as you know, in our practice, we are always bringing our attention back to the here and now, back to the body, because the body only lives in the present moment. The body is our portal to the here and now. This reading, one of my favorites, which I tend to share a lot, it's called Living in the Body by Joyce Sutphin. The body is something you need in order to stay on this planet, and you only get one. And no matter which one you get, it will not be satisfactory. It will not be beautiful enough. It will not be fast enough. It will not keep on for days at a time, but will pull you down into a sleepy swamp and demand apples and coffee and chocolate cake. Body is the thing you have to carry from one day into the next. Always the same eyebrows over the same eyes and the same skin when you look in the mirror, and the same creaky knee when you get up from the floor, and the same wrist under the watch band. The changes you can make are small and costly. Better to leave it as it is. Body is the thing that you have to leave eventually. You know that because you've seen others do it. Others who were once like you, living inside their pile of bones and flesh, smiling at you, loving you, leaning in the doorway, talking to you for hours, and then one day they are gone. No forwarding address. I think this really takes us to the core of this practice. We have to, at some point, let go of the body. We have to let go of the familiarity of this body, even as strange and as changing as it is. Sometimes this practice is described as dying while alive. And one of the ways you can train yourself to this sense of letting go and letting be is to focus on what the teacher Shinzen Young talks about as noticing the micro endings. noticing the little things as they fall away. And I'd like to offer a little practice here. This will be just for a few minutes. If you like, you might close your eyes. And you can take 3 slow breaths. And notice, if you would, primarily focusing on bringing your attention to the exhalation. It has been said that each out-breath is a death. Each out-breath is a falling away of the here and now, a dying away, a letting go. And can you just track that movement of the breath out and that moment of stillness after the exhalation is complete? You might also feel the in-breath, how the in-breath is an arriving into a brand new moment. The out-breath, a letting go. And again, just sensing the falling away of the breath inside. And now you might shift your attention to notice the sounds around you. Notice 360 degrees. Notice the sounds, the closest in, the furthest away. And allow yourself to explore this question. When you open to sounds, what is vanishing right now? And can you sense these micro endings? And it might notice, when you notice something has disappeared, you might just mentally note, gone. Now, if you like, you might deepen your breath. And if you like, you can gently open your eyes. Or remain with them closed. That's fine too. So I noticed there that my dog very conveniently provided some background sound. I'm not sure you could hear that, but I know exactly what she was barking at. Our local fox was coming by to check out the seeds that had fallen below the bird feeders. Sound is very, very interesting as a meditation tool, because you'll notice when you begin to sensitize yourself to the sounds that there is an arising of sound, and then the sustaining of sound, and then that falling away, and that sense of the space between the sounds. Noticing the micro endings in your experience. That sense of it's gone. It has a few benefits. One of them is it can sharpen your concentration in a really unique, interesting way. It also opens up a sense of more like sensory clarity, because you're noticing all the distinctions of the sound vibrations. But it also develops this muscle of what we could call inner equanimity. the ability to let things come, and the ability to let things go without pushing or pulling. It's one of my favorite elements of sound meditation. You have no control over the sound. All you can do is to let the sounds arise and let them fall away. And of course, we can open and apply that in our lives, and remembering that all things change. Remembering that your levels of stress, of unhappiness, of unsteadiness, of dissatisfaction, of suffering, in all of your relationships and your relationship to life, it's all about your response to change. What you hold on to will result in some form of rope burn. And what you can let go will open into some ease, into some space. And what happens when you begin to incline your awareness toward letting go? Well, I'll just tell you a little story here. A few weeks ago, I was making coffee with my AeroPress coffee maker. I'm a bit of a geek here. I wasn't really paying attention, and I completely scalded my right hand with just below boiling water. Actually, I had it set for 200 degrees. So 200 degree water on my right hand. When it happened, I immediately ran cold water over it. I put ice on it. And then I drew on my training, raised as a dominant culture, American, blue-eyed male. I ignored it. And then after ignoring it for a while, and the pain was so strong, it was very, very intense, I thought I'd shift tactics. And over the years, I've had a lot of training in hands-on healing. I've learned a lot of different modalities. And one of the modalities I learned was Reiki. My mother was a Reiki master and really wanted me to learn Reiki, so I kind of learned Reiki. And Reiki is interesting. You know, the way I think of it is it's a way of tuning into universal energy and then using it in the name of healing. I really see it as, if you're familiar with the Buddhist metta practice or loving kindness practice, it really is an expression of metta, of loving kindness. It's about tuning into the immeasurable qualities of kindness, compassion, love, and then kind of applying it, directing it toward a specific area of discomfort. So I've worked a lot with pain in my own body, but also with others. And one thing I've noticed about the healing response is that it usually feels worse before it feels better. And so I put my left hand over my right hand, and I kind of opened up to universal energy. And Reiki has the whole system. It's basically just a way of like using anchors inside to help you kind of open to it. So I had my own way of kind of like opening to universal healing energy. And then I just turned my attention to the energetic presence in my right hand. And pretty quickly, there was a flaring of sensation. And I could really feel very intimately the traumatic insult to the tissue in my right hand. It was kind of hot and angry. And from that place of the witness, from that seat of like the healer, where you hold the space and you allow things to shift, I watched it intensify. It got way worse. It was just like screaming in rage. And here I was very grateful for my practice, not only in meditation, but kind of in the healing arts, and for the countless sessions I had done. Because I know when we turn to the pain, when we hold space for it, it will often respond. It'll often begin to express itself fully. And if we can ride that wave as that pain fully expresses itself, it's going to feel more whole. We can give it room to speak. And then if I can track it, it's going to move and shift and change. And that's kind of what happened. It flared, it screamed, it did all its stuff, and then it began to settle. Did this expedite the healing? Who knows? But I kind of feel it did. and I feel that's generally a very, very helpful thing. Because when you release that resistance, when you release what's holding on around it, then the energy is free to flow. And I'll talk about that in a moment. In this practice of rain, and if you're not familiar with this model, the R is to recognize what's presenting. The A is to inquire if you can allow it, if you can make room for it, and sometimes you can't. But when you can, then you turn your attention to actively investigating what's here. Investigating it somatically, also investigating it to the level of like thoughts and beliefs. Naming what's present, and then calling on some form of nurturing, the N of nurturing, some form of loving presence. And then kind of like resting in what shifts afterward. So a question for you, and we'll do a little Zen Pop quiz here. If you like, you can close your eyes. You might take 3 slow, deep breaths. And if you like, let your attention begin to move toward something in your life some issue in your life that feels kind of sticky. Somewhere where you maybe have a complaint or some hurt. And probably best not to choose your most intense issue, but something a little milder that you can kind of get a sense in this inquiry. And when you have a sense of what this might be, again, just anything between you and feeling good, you might inquire, can you name it? Can you name it in a word or two? And then just notice, can you allow it? Can you say yes to it? Can you be with it? And if you can, just sense what it feels like inside. It may feel like a relief of some kind. It might feel like an upwelling of it feeling more intense, maybe a little worse. And can you give it permission to move? And you might just take the next few moments to just sort of track how this might move or shift or change. And here you might deepen your breath. And if this wants a little more time, you can make an appointment to let it know that you'll be with it a little more fully later. In our retreat, one of my beloved friends, Conda Mason, talked about many years ago when she came to the Kripalu Yoga ashram where I lived. And she went through a very, very powerful healing in her discovery of opening to energy and feeling. And I want to talk a little bit about what is that response, that inner response when we make room for discomfort. The yoga that I was trained in Kripalu Yoga, is very energetic. It's not so much about perfection of the form, but more about the inner experience, about opening to the energy. And so that energy that you're opening into when you're exploring letting go, there's a quality of energy. You can call it life force, you can call it prana, chi, ki, Holy Spirit, organ, whatever. It has 3 qualities. One quality of energy or life force is that it runs your autonomic system for you. You don't have to think about blinking or producing saliva or swallowing. Your body just does it automatically. It also knows how to heal. So if you break a leg, the basic instruction is set it and rest. And somehow, life force knows how to bring in everything it needs to heal the wound and oftentimes actually make it stronger than it was before. When you get a fever, it's a healing response to move in there and clean out whatever is challenging your system. But there's another quality to this energy, and I like to think of it as how life force is intelligent. It's evolutionary. Maybe it's a little bit of a leap, but it's not for me anymore, because I really believe this, that this energy that is healing is also designed to bring you into a greater sense of integration, into a greater sense of wholeness. So if you've ever done a yoga pose, you're put into a posture and you hang out there. You go to where, as we say in yoga, you go to that place where it hurts good. Like, it's not pleasant, but there's some inner sense of like, this is actually kind of calling my attention. If I hang out here, I think something pleasant or something wholesome is going to happen. So you go to that place and you hang out there and you be with it. You recognize it, you allow it, you breathe, you investigate, you relax, you nurture it with breath. And then that sense of stagnation, congested energy begins to move. It begins to shift. And then there's this endorphin response. Now the question is, where does it move? Where does it release to? When you free up energy in your system, where does it go? What I posit and what I experience is it tends to go to the next place where it's not flowing, because that's what it's designed to do. That free-flowing life force that is healing is going to go to where it's not flowing, to where it's stagnant, to where it's congested. So quite often when we do this practice of investigating what's between you and feeling free and kind of riding that wave, there'll be a release, and then guess what? It's going to move somewhere else, because it's designed to take you into greater and greater sense of wholeness, which means it's going to present to you what needs attention. So there's a very interesting element here about exploring this, because it really demonstrates that you can't muscle your way through this practice. That there's an element here of allowing it to unfold. Just a moment here for some semantics. I wrote someone last week that I was kind of in dialogue with a headache that I had. And I said, and this is what I wrote them, I said, it doesn't seem like I can let this go, so I'm going to my alternative strategy to let it be. So what's the difference between letting it go and letting it be? Some teachers say the words are completely synonymous. Let it go equals let it be. But to me, letting go means there's some sense like it'll never come back. Like if I let it go, I'm done. And that can have a certain, like a kind of an aggressive quality to it. Letting it be is perhaps more nuanced. So you might explore what words resonate best for you. Letting it go or letting it be. But nonetheless, whether you're letting it go or you're letting it be, I think you can make a case that it really comes down to this. Seeing what's there exactly for what it is, naming it, finding a way to access presence, to be with it, finding a way to access what we call loving presence, some form of empathy, kindness, compassion, and then giving it permission to express itself. So what happens when you do this? What happens when you embrace this sense of letting go or letting be? I really feel when you really engage in this practice, this is a practice of deconstruction. You are deconstructing the conditioned self. And someone once said, when you're a little person, when you're a young person, you're a hard drive with no virus protection. So this practice, pointed out by stress, suffering, dissatisfaction, is going to take you back to that programming. And any programming that has to do with I, me, and mine is going to require some attention. And of course, this takes you back, for everyone I've met, it takes you back to the early family patterns that you pick up. And so quite often people will share with me, like, why can't I let this go? And quite often it's so close in. And sometimes you can't let it go. You can't let it be. You can recognize it, but on some level, there's some level of fear. It might be traumatizing. It might flood you or overwhelm you. It might leave you ungrounded. And this is why I always like to point this out, that when you're presented with something in your practice or in your life, and you can feel the cling, the clench, the snag, you really need to ask yourself, can I be with this? Is now the time to make room for this? And listen very, very deeply. Listen somatically to the felt sense of your body. Because I really feel that innate, intelligent, and evolutionary energy you access when you ask that question, it's going to give you some signals. And you have to interpret those signals. And you may get a sense of, not now. It's not right. Sometimes I notice that when I just sort of, okay, can I be with it? I kind of have this feeling of like, just asking the question invoked a little trust into the moment. And I get a sense of like, let's go on for a little bit longer. But it's so important to really listen, whether it feels okay. Because otherwise you're forcing. And so another thing is sometimes you can't let it go. Sometimes you don't want to let it go. Sometimes you don't want to let go of all of it. So I was doing some investigation with someone and they were like, oh, here's this issue. And it's all about I'm so anxious. I'm so hypervigilant. I'm just so worried all the time. And I want to let it go, but I can't. So we kind of got in contact with somatically. And I said, well, so would you want to let it all go? A long pause. And he said, no. He said, I want to keep about 20%. So that I have that 20% that's looking out for me. And I love that. When it comes to worry, restlessness, all that, there's a function of worry which is really healthy. Because it's scanning for what might kill you. And when it's out of control, when it's running the show, it's horrible. But when you got that 20%, that's an ally, what a different world. Sometimes you might notice that what you're holding on to, you can feel it, but if you really trace it back, you might notice that it's tied into a persistent thought, or really a persistent belief. And quite often, and it takes time oftentimes to kind of drill down there, like, what am I believing here at the very, very core? It's often tied into some form of not enough, not worthy, not good enough. And there's a very powerful inquiry when you're really in touch with it, the kind of those somatic tendrils of how that belief lives in your nervous system. You can ask yourself, who are you without this thought? And then listen. Sometimes it can be quite dramatic. Sometimes there's a relief. Sometimes there's a glimpse. More than one time, when I've been with someone, I've asked them, and they actually fell out of their chair. It was so disorienting. Because we believe those beliefs, that early programming. So it's very interesting to ask yourself, to explore like these micro endings, the sense of like, of falling away, this possibility of letting go, of letting be. I've talked quite often about this system I love that explores letting go, letting be through questions. And you might, again, Zen pop quiz, you can close your eyes. Bring in the mind something you kind of feel you're holding on to right now. Something you just feel little attachment to. It can be really, really small. I'm going to offer these questions, and I'll offer this substituting let it go and let it be. So taking 3 breaths Just notice something you're holding on to. And you can ask yourself now, could you let this go right now? Or could you let this be right now? If you could let it go, would you? Or if you could let it be, would you? And when would you let it go? When would you let it be? One thing I love about these three questions is they help you to sustain attention on this possibility of letting go, of letting be. So sometimes we know we want to let go, we can't. When you investigate why not, sometimes it's something you want to keep, sometimes you're not ready to, sometimes it's too traumatizing, sometimes you might need support in letting go. But there's also an element of how letting go is organic. You know, when you're a kid, you got a favorite toy, and then one day you kind of grow out of it. And certainly many people notice when you begin a meditation practice, your life begins to shift. There are things that you enjoy that you may not enjoy as much. And I think this sense of letting go needs to be done gently. So we can let go of our issues, we can let go of what we're holding on to in daily life. But what does letting go have to do with awakening or enlightenment? I'm looking at the time and I only have a few minutes here, but this is fascinating stuff to me. If you're doing concentration practice, you're focusing your attention on an object. When you notice your attention is on the future, you let go of your future orientation. When you notice your mind is focused on the past, you let go of past orientation. So there's a sense of letting go of everything other than what you're concentrating on. And if you do that over a period of time, you begin to calm, you begin to arrive. You begin to kind of sense this witness. When you focus your attention on this broad awareness, when you focus your attention on the witness or mindfulness, you're taking the seat of non-preferential awareness. And here, when you notice moving toward pleasant, moving away from unpleasant, you let go of that movement of the mind. You let go of the inclination of the mind to move toward pleasant, unpleasant feeling tones. You let go of the mind moving into habitual ways of reactivity. And when you do that, over time, you become more and more established in this sense of like awake, non-grasping, non-judging awareness. But then what? And this is where the practice gets very, very interesting, because then you can let go of your anchor. And you can begin to turn your attention to what Sri Nisargadatta calls the light behind the witness. What is it that is aware? And that inquiry takes you into a very subtle place of deep allowing, of deep abiding. There's more to say on this. I didn't get fully through the talk that I wanted to. What I would like to do in our remaining minutes is to share with you some instructions from Ajahn Chah, who is one of the inspirations, kind of founding teachers in this tradition of insight meditation. He talks a little bit about when you embrace the sense of letting go. So if you like, you can close your eyes. You might take 3 slow, full breaths, and as I share these instructions, just imagine these coming from Ajahn Chah, who taught many, many years ago in such simple but profound language. Whatever arises in the mind, just watch it and let go of it. Don't even wish to be rid of thoughts. Then the mind will return to its natural state. No discriminating between good and bad, hot and cold, fast and slow. No me and no you. No self at all, just what there is. When you walk, there's no need to do anything special. You simply walk and see what is there. No need to cling to isolation or seclusion. Wherever you are, know yourself by being natural and watching. If doubts arise, watch them come and watch them go. It's very simple. Hold on to nothing. It's as though you are walking down a road. Periodically, you will run into an obstacle. When you meet an obstacle, just see it and overcome it by letting it go. Don't think about the obstacles you've already passed. Don't worry about those you have not yet seen. Stick to the present. Don't be concerned about the length of the road or destination. Everything is changing, and whatever you pass, don't cling to it. Eventually, the mind will reach this natural balance where practice is automatic. All things will come and go of themselves. And we'll close with these words from Tilopa. Let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't try to make anything happen. Relax. Right now. And rest. As you're ready, you can gently deepen your breath. As you're ready, you can open your eyes if you like, or you might like to continue onward. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Best wishes to you in your practice and in all things.